Hello and welcome to our August edition of the Cinetopia radio show. And this is our Edinburgh International Film Festival special. So we're here on a Tuesday. The film festival's begun. I'm Amanda. I'm the founder of Cinetopia, and I'm here with some regulars as I get back again for who are taking in the festival in intensity. Back with Jim Ross. Jim, how are you? Our co-producer.
Good. Still squeezing in a bit of cinema around childcare, which is getting easier, but we're getting there. But the festival is here. There's a lot of interesting stuff on. There's a few things I saw at other festivals which have come to Edinburgh and I think are really worth people checking out. So we'll talk about a few of them today. But yeah, it's a good lineup. There's a lot of good films there. And I think the ones we've got today are pretty good. And I think we've all got recommendations for some other ones as well.
Yep. And so I'm also back with Clara. Clara, how's it going?
Good. I'm tender from enjoying the Fringe too much. But yeah, just getting in and about it. So yeah. Here I am.
It's a really busy season. It feels like intense because everyone's around. Back with Isobel Salamon. Isobel, how are you doing?
I'm very well. Slightly exhausted from all the festival shenanigans, but aside from that, loving like the buzz of the city and also all the films that we've got ahead of us today.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's just dive right into what we will be reviewing, and then we'll talk a little bit about the festival as a whole. We'll be reviewing the film AFTERSUN, which was the gala premiere directed by Charlotte Wells, a Scottish director. And we'll also be reviewing the film NUDE TUESDAY by Armağan Ballantyne. That is the midway gala, which will, I think, be happening the evening that this is on record and on EHFM. So you can check that out as well. And then we'll also be reviewing Official Competition as a group, which is directed by Gaston Duprat and Mariana Cohn, Argentine directors. And so that will be the three that we kind of pulled together, but we'll also be talking about a whole bunch of other films we've seen, we want to see. This is kind of a two-parter for us, ideally. So we'll hopefully be coming back with some more interviews as a second part for our Edinburgh International Film Festival, because it's our hometown film festival and we love to be part of it. And it's really exciting to see what's on offer. But I'd like to start with, this is big for the festival because it's changed its place. A long time ago, it used to be in August around with the Fringe and the Edinburgh International Festival, and took it back to June. Then we had the pandemic and whatnot, and now we're back in August. And I kind of would like to ask the team how they feel, because this is like, there's so much going on right now in Edinburgh. It's like overwhelming, exciting. There's this buzz back in the city, for better or worse for some people. But yeah, I just wanted to see how you guys felt the festival from your experience so far has been sort of connecting with it, or what your opinions are, because I'm sure there's last night at the Cameo bar, there was some differing opinions on how that, how this is working. So throw out the controversy there.
I'd imagine your opinion on this probably depends on whether you're an Edinburgh resident or not, to be honest. I don't know. I mean, I'm not an Edinburgh native, but I have lived in Edinburgh a long time now. And I really like the Fringe. I really like the festival. I like the range of stuff that's on and the way the city kind of like transforms and comes to life. It does come with its annoyances, use of public spaces for private, production companies and, there's a lot of issues around there that annoyed the shit out of me, to be honest. It's very hard to get anywhere is the other thing. But I think in general, it's good. And I think for the film festival, I think it's probably good that it's moved to August, to be honest, on balance. I think it also helps where it places it during the film festival calendar. I think it gets a slightly different lineup of films as a result. I think there's less pressure on it to have, world premieres and such. And as such, I think it does get, some films that it wouldn't if it was this far, if it was even further ahead of London, say, or if it was even further ahead of Venice, or if it was, just after Cannes or something. Like, it does get slightly different films, and I think it makes it a bit easier for it to get a slightly more varied lineup. You know, and opinions will differ on whether it succeeds on that in any given year, but I think in general, a move to August allows that. So whether it's connecting up with the rest of the festival atmosphere in the city, I don't really know. But I mean, you know, the whole place just kind of is buzzing with activity. So it's definitely linked into that. So I think on balance, it's probably a good thing, but it's, you know, it comes with its pluses and minuses, as does the festival in Edinburgh, to be honest.
I mean, I could do with more time. I could do with 2 Augusts. So having both at once is distressing. Time means nothing to me now. If it did mean anything tangible before, time is hurtling by, trying to take everything in. But no, I know. Yeah, it makes sense what you're saying, Jim. And obviously, I've lived here my whole life, so I do have the love-hate experience, relationship with it, as all locals do. I like trying to go out last night was a nightmare. I had to call in all of our favors to try and get into clubs instead of waiting for like an hour in a line of 50 people. But yeah, it's fun. I wouldn't trade it.
It's also finally things are open late night, which, you know, as a former New Yorker, you know, I really love that. Like although I'm not actually out that late anymore, but like the possibility of this is very exciting.
I know, I always miss the 5 a.m. license when it goes.
Yeah, that's true. And I always like the fact that because we have so much sun at the moment, so it's just like it kind of like teams up with that. Like it's really great to have sort of like things to do when it's sunny, and that the sun just seems to be never ending at the moment, which is quite good. But I mean, I guess you also have to look from the perspective of, are you losing people because there's so much on? So obviously they can't see everything. But I do think often like people will be who are attracted to going and seeing more comedy will go and see that anyway. So they might not be coming and seeing like dramatic films. So it probably just does it a service of bringing more people in and giving them more things to do.
I think you hit something there, though, Isobel, like whether there's a bit more competition, because now anybody who works at the film festival may not thank me for saying this, but certainly the screening of ad. So I didn't go to see AFTERSUN at the press screening. I went to the gala screening and then the party afterwards. And the screening of the film, you know, I'll leave my opinions on the film for now because we're going to review it, but it was happening in like 3 more or less concurrent screenings at the View at the Omni Centre. And I think I was in like, I think the second screen or something. Like it was on the big main screen and then 2 smaller ones as well. The screen I was in wasn't full, which I think is pretty unusual for the opening film of Edinburgh Film Fest. So I was a little surprised by that. So I think there could be a little bit of an element of there's maybe a bit more competition for eyeballs at this time of year. So, you know, as I say, it comes with pluses and minuses. I think it gets it more into the stuff is happening, right? Because I think the problem with some film festivals, and I think Edinburgh's occasionally suffering this, is people who are not like plugged into film, right? They don't even necessarily know it's happening, right? Until it's like already started happening. You don't really have that problem during festival season because everybody's well aware that, you know, there's all sorts of stuff going on. Oh, let's have a look at what's going on. Oh, there's the book festival, there's the television festival, there's the Fringe, there's now the film festival.
Yeah.
So I think it probably gets a little bit, it allows it to kind of like piggyback on just the fact that it's the festival, you know, capital T, capital F in Edinburgh. So I think that helps, but yeah, I think there's maybe a bit more competition where there wouldn't normally be.
I wonder if the Twilight screening at St. Andrew's Square will be full tonight.
Well, it doesn't look as busy as it was. Like I've seen pictures of the outdoor stuff, and it doesn't seem as busy as it was. And I wonder if like that outdoor screening stuff necessarily, because it wasn't always tied to the film festival in general. But you know, you have millions more people in the city, so you do have the possibility of more access, at least visibility wise, you know, to the film festival. But also, I think I've heard over the years this discussion, because it was a huge controversy when they moved to June before, and it was largely around actually like funding from councils to suggest please spread out activity across, you know, which I think we all probably agree there's way too much happening in 1 month in Edinburgh, but you know, what about the other, you know, months? And there's plenty of, you know, people. I
mean, not to go all angry local man about it, but I would argue there's a lot happening across the other months as well. I mean, you're barely done with the festival, and then like, you know, Princess Street Gardens getting cordoned off for flipping Christmas markets.
Oh, that doesn't count. I don't think that counts. I mean, because that can run parallel to an actual cultural festival. you know, because you sort of you can mill around the Christmas situation.
It's still weird private use of public space.
Oh yeah, for sure.
You know,
for sure.
so when I say that's more what I'm talking about in terms of like, you know, competing with cultural events. Yeah, no, sure, you're absolutely right, but. Yeah.
I think the meaning I have is that there's quite a lot of tourism or whatever throughout the year. Why does everything have to be focused on one, you know, on 1 month? And that's always been quite an argument with that. And also, as you were saying, the competition is going to come down, because if you're having these really amazing acts from around the world that have these mixtures of kind of like spoken word and, you know, like harp and, you know, music and all this stuff, then like a film, which is lovely, you know, might not be able to kind of compete with it. On the other hand, I think one of the things that made the Edinburgh International Film Festival known over the years is that people often would want to come to Edinburgh in a time when it is really buzzy, so you can attract certain type of people who might be here for the book festival, that might be here for the TV festival. There's quite a lot of important people who come to those, so maybe they can be then aligned with the film festival, and then you're kind of like you're bringing the masses together in one time, and then leaving the city rest for the locals perhaps slightly more. I see both sides. I think regardless of the success of this year, I feel like and I was saying this to somebody in a meeting after one film, you know, you got to give changes like this time. And I always sort of like liken it to like football manager, like they never give the football manager enough time after he loses like 6 games or something like that. Like, let's try it out and see what happens. And, you know, and perhaps, you know, it might grow into something.
Are you one of these Spurs? Are you one of these Spurs fans that's a Nuno Espirito Santo apologist? Is that what I'm gathering from this?
It's not his fault.
I won't tell you when I became a Spurs fan, and because it was around a manager who was only there for like 4 months, and I was shocked. I was like, how would you get rid of such a lovely human being so quickly? And yet, frankly, I've learned now they've gone through like 17 managers since then. So yes, I'm shocked that they pretend they get rid of them so quickly, and they blame them, you know, for everything. So toxic. It's just one person, you know. They constant and I think artistic directors are what, and we have a new, I guess, artistic director for CMI for the Edinburgh International Film Festival, and I actually felt like it has a new energy. It feels like a new energy to the film festival, and so I'm kind of excited about that. But I feel like, I guess my point is to always give change a little bit of time. That's
And
for everyone,
I was just going to say, and for the festivals to speak to each other a bit more, like I think that would be really helpful, like if they connected a bit more and made it a more harmonious community, so that you were getting suggestions of, these things are in close proximity, why not jump from the book festival, go to a comedy show, then come and see a film? Like, you could do all these program things together. That I think there's just needs to be a bit more unity. From
the perspective of everyone that I know that lives here, we can't afford to do everything like that we'd like to do. So I feel like the festivals could be much more lucrative if they're spread out between a couple of paychecks as opposed to 1 month's paycheck, you know, like, so I'm having to make financial decisions, not decisions on time and scheduling even. It's just, I think it'd be much better if we had, to everyone listening that may be able to influence such decisions, book festival and the film festival together in 1 month, that'd be fantastic. And then leave the Fringe as it is in August. Please give me more time.
Festivals.
And we could have a jazz festival too. Book, jazz,
and the jazz, book, jazz, film.
Good little trio.
Exactly. That's busy enough. And then exactly. And then Fringe can just have at it.
Well, I have a feeling we won't be making the final decision, but we've put our suggestions out there, and take them, please, Edinburgh Council or whoever's in charge. We have our thoughts. So we'll start then with our first film, which premiered. It was a UK premiere of AFTERSUN, but it premiered at Cannes originally. It's a directed by Charlotte Wells. And I'm just going to throw this at Isobel. If she do you want to give an intro to the film?
Why not? So basically, this is about the story of a young man. So he's early 30s, and he has an 11-year-old daughter. He's no longer with the mother of the daughter, and he and the daughter go on a trip to, I believe it's Turkey, to sort of basically have a summer together, a summer holiday together. In the meantime, he's struggling with mental health issues, and yeah, we just basically see the two of them connecting over a series of about a week. And yeah, it's just this very quiet, very considered look at what it means to be a child who's growing up and an adult who's trying to be there and trying to step up, but also still dealing with what you're dealing with in your own personal life. And I found this film incredibly confronting and very moving, and was quite disoriented after I came out of the cinema. So I'll throw it open to everyone to have a chat about this and then come back and say some more opinions on that.
I absolutely loved this film. I kind of expected I would, because Cinetopia kind of came out of the Edinburgh Short Film Festival. Charlotte Wells' short film Blue Christmas had won Best Scottish Short a few years ago. Jamie Robson's kind of a friend of Cinetopia who was in that film. So I've known of Charlotte Wells' work over the years, and to see this as her debut feature, I've had a lot of expectation for it. It had a great buzz in Cannes. It did not disappoint, and it didn't disappoint in a way that it took me a couple, as you said, when you left, you felt like you needed, like that you were kind of blown away. And it took, I think both Clara and I were sitting close to each other, and I needed about 30 minutes to an hour to kind of process how I felt about it, because I just needed that time. And I thought, like, I really loved the perspective and the way that it was filmed around a young person at that age. And I felt there was something so reflective about, and just the way everything was shot with close-ups and sort of even almost like sensual imagery and sort of like slow moments to kind of breathe and take this in, is that you really felt like you were from her point of view in so many ways of how you observe the world. And I guess maybe particularly did not have that kind of similar situation. I've never been at one of these inclusive holiday resorts, although it does look kind of fun. And but I do feel like that age, especially as an only child, which I've experienced, has this kind of this feeling of isolation, and that isolation came across really well with the way that it was filmed, the sounds, the sort of observational experience that one has, and also kind of a little bit of a listless way. I did mention one bit where it's like, I really, I don't like Sofia Coppola, and where I think Lost in Translation does try to create this like isolation and observation of a woman kind of feeling, lost. I think this film does it in a much better way, where she's trying to navigate between what age she is, where she'll be growing up, and how to deal with her father, who's obviously going through who we learn through certain clues is having mental health, issues. And I think it handles it really powerfully.
It really grew on me as I was watching it. I mean, yeah. And upon reflection afterwards, but yeah, as it sort of unfurled into a really, really genuine and sort of delicate and understated study of memory and the mental health of a parent, and how entangled they are in an interaction over the course of years. Yeah, it really grew on me. Slow burner, but it was so mellow and so understated and so nostalgic and meditative as well.
Yeah.
About the incumbent fears of being a parent and the pressures and the joy of being a parent, and the father-daughter relationship, which is which hasn't been studied too much in this way. I mean, when I think of father-daughter relationships on screen, I can think of some kind of intense examples. With a lot of deep drama and darkness, but this one's so much more gentle, which I find interesting, but not less impactful for it, which says a lot. Charlotte Wells described it as emotionally autobiographical, which I find interesting. She said she'd not specifically been on such a holiday, and it's not about her relationship with her father, but it's imbued with similar feelings, which I'm sure a lot of us can relate to. And it really captures that childhood feeling of the holiday as some kind of a wonderful, dreamy, heterotopic space where it's another temporary world possibility and of change, which mirrors but also like disturbs the world that you've left behind. And they inhabit this space in the resort, and we see it sort of help strengthen their bonds, but also form new ones, but also disrupt and completely disturb the characters because they're confronted so much with their own selves, their own fears, their discomforts, and the reality that the time they have together in this way is so temporary. I found that really interesting. Yeah, the temporality of it was interesting to look back on and reflect on. So yeah.
I was going to say, I love how it played with that concept of time. Like you really felt like you were in these sort of elements of the stickiness of when you're on a holiday and you have those moments of intense boredom and you move past it, but then you know that there's these incredible moments as well that are sort of like snapshots in your mind that you will hold forever. And I like that they play around with that with the camera. But I think one thing I found incredibly moving about the film itself was I thought that it took us on, say, a time journey of mental illness. So it sort of reminded me of, you had these extreme highs that they were both going through, and you saw these extreme highs and then these extreme lows, and just these element where with families you're so innately honest with each other and how you know how to hurt someone, and that they both do that to each other. And I find, you know, just with words, and it's one of those things of, well, sometimes you can't take back what you've said no matter how much you want to or what you've done. And yeah, I really like the way that she's playing around with that. It's kind of like she's like ripping off layers of skin and getting into that deep emotional core of what it means to be a human and have human family relationships.
Yeah.
And loneliness as well, because being a child can feel extremely lonely, like just the lonely corners of childhood where even just like the people that are even a few years younger, older than you, just seem to exist across this great gulf of experience, and where that can leave you in experiencing the world and interacting with everyone. Yeah.
I think in addition to everything that folk have mentioned there, it's pretty remarkable for a first feature, I think. This is a really accomplished film. Now, I've had my eye on it for a while because, as Amanda mentioned, Blue Christmas, Charlotte Wells' last short, before she made this, won Best Scottish Short at the Edinburgh Short Film Festival, and I interviewed her around it there, and I watched her other short films in preparation for that interview, and they really are very good. Like she's very, very skilled, and I've recommended another one of hers, Laps, as one of the short film recommendations on the show before, and then the first one that she made, Tuesday, is actually very good as well. I think I'm really, and when we did that interview, she mentioned that she was working on what presumably is now AFTERSUN, because it was about a girl on holiday with her father. I really, really like this. There are a number of elements to it that I think work extremely well. All three of you have all mentioned elements of that already. I think there is something it captures in particular. Now, I honestly can't remember if I ever did go on a holiday like this as a kid, but it just seems to capture something about kind of like 90s UK holiday makers.
Yeah,
that really rings true with me. I can't quite put my finger on exactly what it is, but there's a lot of little tiny attentions to detail, like, you know, the arcade, the motorbike arcade game that the Sophie character, you know, the young girl plays with another boy who kind of like takes a shine to her. There's that, the sort of the, you know, hotels with crap building sites across, or like there's lots of little kind of like bits and pieces that are very, very nicely observed. On a technical level, though, I think this film is really, really good as well. So someone that Charlotte Wells worked with in those shorts is the editor of this film, Blair McClendon, who also edited The Assistant, which I thought was an extremely technically accomplished film. And there are a number of transitions in this film which I think just work absolutely superbly. You know, there's one early on where you see her father doing Tai Chi on the balcony, basically, and it's night, and then there's a kind of a jump cut to daylight, and kind of like so much that it works superbly. There's a shot at the conclusion of the film, which I won't kind of like say what it is, but there's just a continuous camera move where there's obviously a hidden cut there, but it's done so well that, and the tone that then sets, it's really, really quite something for the conclusion of the film. Another thing that I was very impressed by is the use of music in the film. Now, the use of music is kind of serving two purposes, right? One, there's a certain attempt to set time and place, right? You know, there's All Saints on the soundtrack, there's Chumbawamba, Blur, Catatonia, right? It's a very sort of like 90s focused thing. Now, it's not exclusively that, because there is other stuff in there which is from, you know, like if you're going to nitpick, you'd probably place it slightly later. And there's some stuff that's obviously a lot earlier. And one key example of it is Under Pressure by Queen and David Bowie. But the way that the music is used is really, again, its attention to detail is really well observed. There's the way the music is edited in particular, the use of Under Pressure. When you see the film, you will see the way that that's been done. Obviously, it's manipulated, but it really just changes the tone of that scene and really kind of brings it home. But in terms of other things and foreshadowing what is going to happen in the film, there's other uses of music, and I think it's the Blur one, Tender, which is stuck in my head. There's certain lyrics it lingers on, and there's certain bits when it kind of like, you know, fades away to focus on dialogue that I think really get across what is going on with, in particular, Paul Mescal's character, Callum, the father. And I think in terms of how the film is put together, I think is really superb, because I think with a first feature and maybe first bigger budget, it would be very easy, I think, and you know, you have seen this happen a lot of times, for people to kind of like, as filmmakers, maybe get a bit carried away, right? But I think it's still very precisely observed and put together in the same way that our short films were. And I think it's ended up as a really excellent, quite restrained feature as a result, but it's very much in a less is more sense, right? You know, you can enjoy that soundtrack, but it really adds to the film. It's not just a flashy addition. You can aesthetically like the transitions, but it really kind of puts you in that space and what the characters are feeling. I was really impressed with this. I mean, I was hoping I would be. I've not come out disappointed. I really do think it's excellent. It's an excellent film, and I think it will do. It should do pretty well, I think.
I would piggyback on what you said about restrained, and I think that's the part that I really liked most about it, is because it's specifically around some of these clues that, you know, you start to see. Like, you don't know too much about the whole history, the backstory, you know, what's going to happen in the future is a bit sort of nebulous, which is similar again with, as Jim suggested, checking out Charlotte's other shorts. You know, Blue Christmas has some sort of mysteries to it as well. But one of the words that hit me, and you see you mentioned Blur, but one of the words that hit me halfway through the film that I was like, this felt really tender. And I thought this film just felt like the relationship was quite tender, all of these sort of relationships that were built. And I really felt like, I felt like it was very warm and comfortable, even though it was a very complicated, you know, storyline as well. So, you know, but like, I just thought it was a very tender film. And really appreciated that. The only thing I would say, and this is probably just my bias of the fact that I do happen to enjoy Normal People on an occasional, like just watch it like when I need like a little go-to comfort zone. It was hard for me to place the age of the father character for a while. And again, that might just be my bias of seeing him as a younger person in high school. And I think that like at one point they kind of have to clarify his age. So, but it didn't take away from the film. It was just, again, something where the age was, you know, the age, and I think that was sort of the point, but the age between the two characters was maybe slightly closer, for it was hard for me to buy for the very beginning until they like said, oh, he's over 30 or something like that. So
so I think he was meant to be 31, and I bought that completely, because I was like, he had her when he was 20. And a lot of people have children very young, and it kind of makes sense at the position that he's in now, and why he also could still have that loving sort of relationship with the mother of Sophie, because of the fact that, you know, he was never going to stay with that woman the whole amount of time. And I liked that it sets a place of why he's in the position he's in, and also dealing with the issues he's dealing with, because that kind of is something that you deal with in those young 30s. And I think Charlotte Wells, from a few interviews I've heard, I think that she said that she had that sort of thing. That's why she made the film, because she looks back on her parents and she's like, you were so young, this is me now, and you already had like a 14-year-old daughter. This is crazy. But I think as we've been talking, I realized like why I found it so upsetting and so moving. And it was that, I think it's just in society, we just, pass away like the gentility in relationships. We don't value that. And I think this really showed how beautiful relationships can be and how the relationship was so honest and so pure. And it's just not something that's valued so much in like a capitalist driven world. And I think that's just so sad. And yeah.
One thing that I want to touch on there, like just following off what Isobel said there, and also links in a little bit with what Amanda said there, because Amanda, you said it was a fairly complicated story. I'd actually argue, I'm not sure it is a complicated story, but to link into what Isobel said, what it does have is it does have a very complicated tone, I think, right? Because there is a lot of balancing things going on here, because like obviously the father character has a lot of internal struggle going on, or at least is trying to move beyond some internal struggle he's had before. And there's a framing device which I'll make explicit because it's pretty much at the opening of the film. It does recur at a few different points where it's an adult Sophie kind of like observing in a sort of like a clubbing scene through strobe lights her father dancing, right? So it's very clear from the start that this is not going to be a happy, breezy story about a kid on, and I think if you'd seen her short films, you'd probably realize that anyway, but the film itself sets out very clearly early on, and with certain kind of shot and score rather than soundtrack choices later on, that, it's not going to be a happy, breezy story. It may have happy, breezy moments, as has been alluded to by everybody here, but it's not going to be a happy, breezy story. And I think that balancing of tone is done really, really superbly, because you can get things across like that relationship being really quite great in one moment and it being a bit dysfunctional in another. And I think that's sometimes it doesn't always come across well on screen with these sort of things, is, a relationship can be more than one thing, and it can be more than one thing from one day to the next. I think what is really, really good about that is it allows you to sympathize with characters whilst also having moments where you're like, good Lord, what are you doing? Like, because there are a couple of times where, like, the father character will do something where you look and go, wow, that's wildly irresponsible. You should not be doing that. But then the context and the tone within which it's placed means that you still value that character. You still value what he's going through. You still value the relationship with the daughter. And that's a very difficult thing to pull off. And this film does it. And I think the way it does it is the performances, Paul Mescal's the father, Frankie Corio, who I think is absolutely remarkable, actually, is the young girl. I think it's her first film, as far as I'm aware. They do this superbly, but then all the other elements that we've already mentioned, Wells's direction, the editing, I think it all comes together to set that tone, and that's the key thing to making that central relationship feel the way it does. And I think that's where the biggest lasting strength of the film lies. I mean, I'd say it's got a lot. There's loads of little bits of attention to detail that I think are great. Like, like there's one shot that lingers on like pool balls being dispensed out of a pool table, and there's one of these images I just remember from childhood, and putting the coin on the table to reserve the pool. It's just it's little things like that where the little attention to detail is great, but on a bigger scale, it's that setting of the tone of the film that makes that relationship work and ends up telling the story that it wants to, rather than what we would project onto it. I'm
trying to figure out why it's grown on me so much, and I think I just realized that it's because it did initially seem simple. I mean, despite the complexities, as you mentioned, Jim, of the tone and the complexity of the characters and their struggles and their relationship over time, you could get your head around it, but in hindsight, to think that actually the memories that Sophie is reflecting on are a collection of real and imagined ones. I think I read that on Screen Scotland. There's a synopsis of it. So when you consider it from that point of view, that makes it much more layered and complex to consider that Sophie might actually be trying to conjure up some kind of an understanding or insight into what her father was going through. So the scenes that we see or how she imagines him struggling, and and then it kind of casts aspersions on some of the good memories as well. So are those imagined, or are those a projection of what she wished it had been like? And
we're all unreliable narrators in our own
exactly. Yeah,
and that's exactly memory. And I think precisely. if I said complicated, I think what I meant to say is mysterious. And I think what I was suggesting, and which connects to Blue Christmas, is that a lot of those answers, the things aren't answered. We don't know exactly what the mental health crisis that potentially the father character goes through. We don't know, and there were parts where we didn't know whether or not he was potentially still alive, so there were these mysterious moments that could have gone into, we will explain this exactly so that you know this. But as you brought up, Clara and Isobel, the memories are sort of these are things that maybe these are the first time that this young person noticed these sort of situations, because they had this long extended period of time to spend together, which then sort of translated into future relationship issues that were in, like you said, in this disco scene or something like that. But really well done in terms of keeping the mystery but also focusing on the relationship. And I think that's and a very specific period of time, which I think works really well.
The only other thing I would say is I really, really enjoyed the sweaty, awkward depiction of that blossoming like teenage romance. I was like,
yes,
so funny.
This is exactly what it's like. It's like, you're here, I'm here, we're of an appropriate age. It was
the debate between British kids from different regions about what exactly they were calling kissing as well. That rang pretty true. That was pretty accurate, that one.
Yeah. Well, very much a great film, AFTERSUN. It's good for a summer watch as well, if you didn't get to go on your own summer holiday, all inclusive. So check it out if you can. I think it's coming out in November via Mubi, so it'll be out. But if you get a chance to see it at a film festival before then, please do. We highly recommend it. Okay, so the next film we're going to review is NUDE Tuesday. It's the midway gala of the Edinburgh International Film Festival, and since we're airing this on a Tuesday, it is actually on Tuesday evening, so you might, if it's not sold out, you should go check it out. And Jim's going to give us a little review or overview of what the film's about.
So I'll keep this fairly short, but if you've seen any of the copy written for promoting this film, it will be talking about it being a gibberish film. And the reason for this is basically the cast perform this film in an entirely made up language. If you listen to it, it kind of sounds like the sort of bastard child of Swedish, Dutch, and Norwegian or something. It sounds vaguely sort of Scandinavian come, Low Countries type language, but it is very much made up. And the idea is, as far as I'm aware, 3 different versions of this film exist. So the version which is screening, the version which we've all seen and is screening at the film festival, has subtitles written by the British comedian Julia Davis. There's another cut out there which exists with subtitles written by, I think, 2 New Zealand comedians. I forget their names, but there's 2 of them. And then there's a third cut which actually exists with no subtitles whatsoever. So you project your own kind of impressions of what is going on onto it. In a basic sense, though, there is still a kind of like a structure around this, and basically you have Laura and Bruno, who are a married couple with kids who are, let's say they're stuck in a bit of a rut. He's a bit hapless. She's very stressed and harried. And they are given the opportunity to go to this retreat, which certainly in the version that we watched, they're kind of, I think, fairly unaware of at the time. It's all very sexually focused. It's basically a retreat run by a kind of self-appointed guru called Bjorg, who's played by Jermaine Clement of Flight of the Conchords fame and various other film stuff that he's gone on to do in recent years. I think What We Do in the Shadows, I think he was in the film version of that as well. But he's very well known at this point. So basically, it then follows them and the various comedic happenings there. and what effect that has on their relationship and how they see each other and how open they are and how vulnerable they are with each other. So that's the story set up. I'll leave the kind of the impressions to everybody here first, but that's the basic story. But the main hook is this idea that it's in a made up language. There is no kind of, or at least certainly to the people who were writing the subtitles, there's no real kind of, hard and fast rules about how they were to do it, but obviously there's some overlap. But yes, there's 3 different versions. The versions we saw was subtitled by Julia Davis. So what did everybody think of it?
Oh my god, I loved it. It was it's very Kiwi in its sort of lightheartedness and surrealness and sort of effortless layers of comedy. It's sort of like I would say I described it to my friend last night as like The Lobster on mushrooms. And yeah, it has this brilliant surreal comic energy that I just loved, and this grand world building which I found so intriguing as well. So it being entirely set on this entirely fictitious island with a completely fictitious language, which is just so novel. Loved it.
I loved it as well, and I found it so fascinating from the perspective of you're making me read subtitles immediately. And I think that someone should write a giant paper on this and look into, does this make it feel like a European film? Because I would say it definitely does compared to a lot of like Kiwi films that we normally see. And you instantly give it a more layer of prestige and when you're actually watching it. But then also from the perspective of, well, making subtitles more accessible because of the fact you've already bought into the faces of these characters that you know. So people might be more, attuned to actually going and seeing this as opposed to not seeing it. But so I was expecting to go in and enjoy this. I love Jackie Van Beek, love Jermaine, love Damon, and I'm very fascinated by like nudist retreats, and something that I find personally just a most fascinating concept in all of these like sort of sexual retreats. And like I find it bizarre that people go on these as holidays and they work through things, but it was just really good fun, ridiculous, hilarious. I can recommend this film to everyone to go and see, and visually stunning. The way that they shot things to do with the mountains and using the lakes, it was just a very pretty film.
It managed, I liked that it had a darkness to it as well. So it was kind of, there's a darkness, there's a sadness. I mean, you can't really send up people for having pathetic and frustrating lives without it being a little bit grim at times, but it manages to lighten it completely. It's hilarious. So there's a line that encapsulates it for me. It's they're having an argument in front of their children. They say, one says, "I'm sick of my life," and the other goes, "Everyone's sick of their lives." and then they address the children who you barely see for the rest of the film, and just says, "Your mother and I are actually very happy." And just this is complete bald-faced lying. Oh, brilliant.
Well, it's that time again. I did not love this film. So we're back here again at this point on the show. I'm
just happy it's not me for once.
Yeah, I admired a lot of the creative. Let's start with positives though, right? Because it's not that I like intensely disliked it or something. I was just left a bit indifferent by it, to be honest. I do admire a lot of the creativity. I think this idea of, performing it in a made-up language, but more importantly, a made-up language that nobody else understands. It's not like it's, because you get people out there who know how to write and speak, Elvish. And Tolkien and things like that. But literally a completely non-understandable language. I admire the creativity to perform and film entirely in that way, and I think it's worth noting that the performance of the cast I think is really good, and I think they have so basically the 3 leads as I would classify them, right? So Jackie Van Beek as Laura the wife, Damon Herriman as Bruno the husband, and then the sort of the spiritual leader, if you like, played by Jermaine Clement. They are all very skilled performers, right? They are all very skilled performers, and they have a real talent for kind of just making things sound funny. I think that I add that to Jermaine Clement in particular. I think ultimately, though, I have to be honest, I do think it has allowed what is a pretty mundane and, pretty well-worn story to sneak in under the radar here. Like the old classic tired couple.
Yeah.
I don't know. It just, and then it doesn't say that, like, if you told me that the comedian who wrote the subtitles of this was British, I would believe you, because it has this sort of this curious British tendency for kind of like coming up with twee names for genitals, basically, and like it has that at various different points in the subtitles. It's just like, it's kind of the same joke a million times. So I didn't find the subtitles themselves particularly new or funny. I did find myself relying more on the actual physical performance of the cast, right? Jermaine Clement basically in the middle of a three-way or something, and then making a polite inquiry as to whether somebody needs something, and then Damon Herriman giving up on sex halfway through because he's so annoyed, and then stomping off theatrically and things like there were a lot of things which I think were carried by the cast, and I don't think the script that has been superimposed on the top of it, I don't think it really adds that much. Now how much of that is down to the original framework that there is to work with, and how much is down to kind of the subtitles themselves, I don't know. I mean, it's probably a little, it's probably a little column A, a little column B, but I can't honestly say I found this horrendously funny. It has its moments. It raised plenty of chuckles out of me, but I'd be lying if I said I'd be lying if I said I was as amused by the film as I was by the premise and by the just the physical performance of the lead cast.
I saw the subtitles as a little extra, I mean, I enjoyed the fact that they were just completely, that Julie Davis was just sort of tasked and given free rein to come up with anything, and she struggled with it technically, and also because she was given such free rein. I think one of the I think the director said to her, like, "Oh, here's a fun thought exercise. Why don't you try and set it on another planet and see if that kind of inspires you to come up with better jokes." So knowing that and being able to separate those two things and thinking of it as like a collaborative project with different strains, so you can choose to kind of pay attention to just the film, or you can choose to pay attention to the subtitles. I think that helped me, because I do agree it does feel like the same joke over and over sometimes, and it is very much superimposed. It does seem like somebody who's just come up with their own subtitle track and just superimposed it. But there are some really great elements, like some phrases that she comes up with, but that really just show her talent as a comedy writer. So when Jermaine Clement's character, the cult leader, is describing his proteges and himself, he refers to them as soul miners and sex voyagers, and I just thought that was fucking hilarious. I'm an eagle pimp with a bit of a grudge. That was a good one as well.
And those long toes,
so many
sexy, endearing long toes. I'm just like, what is this? Is that a sexy?
Yeah. If you're in the mood just to chuckle at something silly, like, then it will go down a treat.
If you like sort of like New Zealand sense of humor, like I think is cool, because it's so like representative of that particular area as well, and so similar. You
see that's the funny thing, because I think a lot of New Zealand comedy, like, I really like it. I really like it. The subtitles felt very late 90s British alt comedy to me, and I say that as a sort of, I get that, like I like that, but this particular, like, it wasn't all successful. Like, it felt like a few of the lines felt like to actually to stick with the Julia Davis connection here, actually, a few of the subtitles felt like skits they would have rejected from Big Train, to be honest. If it, I actually think I would probably have enjoyed this film more if I'd seen the version without subtitles, to be honest.
But don't you think, Jim, that you're coming from the bias of that this is like, New Zealand, Australian film industry is still a relatively young industry. So it's not got the classical roots that, say, British comedy has, or, American.
Well, no, because I think the British element here is the bit that failed it.
Well, exactly. So that's what I'm saying. So they're trying out new things that haven't really been done before.
I don't know. I think, I mean, I'm actually going to agree with Jim. That was just very odd. Usually, we rarely agree.
You don't need to sound so surprised, man.
And I didn't find it horrendously funny, because I came out of a much more serious and funny a film I'll talk about later, and then watched this and did not find it horrendously funny, and actually felt the gimmick to be kind of frustrating, but still thought, like you said, performance is good, scenery great, like a slapstick comedy. I I'm not sure I'm the greatest expert on New Zealand comedy, but what I've seen, I've really enjoyed. This wasn't the film for me, in terms of making me hysterically laugh, and really feeling like it held together for me. But you know,
but I think just to go back to the point you were making, Isobel, right? I think you're right. It is new and it is kind of like innovative, but I think the problem is it kind of needs to have the courage of its convictions there, right? Because I actually think what's happened is the subtitles have ended up making it feel a lot more staid and twee and run of the mill than I think it actually is. And I think that's a result of the repetitive type of gag that is in the script, right? Because if you've watched enough British comedy, right, and we can talk about the classical roots of British comedy, but like British comics love to come up with innuendo for genitals, right? That you could write entire encyclopedias with the things that people's genitals and private parts have been called in British comedy, and that comes through just so loud and clear in the script. It's like if there's any opportunity to give it some silly twee name, it happens. And it's just, I feel like the inventiveness of the idea and the gift that they've actually been kind of given with the physical performances of the cast, I think is wasted with these subtitles. Like I really would, and in terms of them trying something new, to an extent, they still achieved their goal, because I would be really interested to see this film with the other set of subtitles to see what I made of it, and without the subtitles to see how I felt about it there. Because the element of it that didn't work for me is very much that part of it. Like, the more absurdist elements, like a lesbian couple having sex in the woods while they are looking after a chicken which is standing next to them. The couple trying to have sex in the woods while they oversee a goat, and it's in this ridiculous, and then the Bjorg, Jermaine Clement's character, sort of like, you get little hints here and there about, like, he's not this spiritual leader, he's just a bit of a doofus like the rest of them. And and then there's one particular sort of, like, I suppose you'd call it a sex scene by a lake between two of the main characters, where it's just that is hilarious. It is funny, but the thing that's funny there is the stupid weird noises that they make and the body language and the way they interact. It's not the subtitles. It honestly, I think that let it down for me, and it gave it this air to me, and this will probably sound unnecessarily harsh, but you can take it what way you want, because like sometimes these are very funny and sometimes these are not very funny. It came across some of the subtitles like sort of like pseudo student improv, really. And sometimes that works really well, sometimes it doesn't work at all, and for me it's somewhere in between, but it's more towards the end of not working for me. So I think that it's mainly that's the part of it that let it down for me.
Yeah, I think I would probably do the same and try to without the subtitles, because I think I was probably also focused on the subtitles way more, and maybe that's how I watch films. I focus very highly on the subtitles, but I don't know.
I do want to call it that I think that the guy who played Rufus, being Ian Zaro, that I think he's going to become a huge star. Like, his facial expressions were incredible.
No, I mean, like even the supporting cast and side roles, right? They do very well, right? They are just funny performances. It's other parts that didn't work for me, unfortunately. But.
So, Jim, it didn't make you want to have a pet goat?
I don't know if I could have a pet goat, because I've eaten goat and I quite like eating goat, so I don't think I'd be able to keep a pet goat for a while.
What about chicken? There's something beautiful about just having a pet like goat or like a pet pig. I was like, that seems quite nice.
Well, I don't know. Actually, I better not say that. It's a spoiler. Anyway. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad that we have, it's a mixed opinion. I like a little disagreement. So, but it's NUDE Tuesday is happening this Tuesday, screening here in the Edinburgh International Film Festival. So check it out. Half of us really like it. Okay, so the final film we're going to review is Official Competition, directed by Gaston Duprat and Mariano Cohn. Clara, tell us about this film.
So, Official Competition. The film begins with a question posed by an incomprehensibly rich pharmaceutical mogul, which is how to be immortal, how to leave an impression and a legacy and it's such an indelible mark on culture and society so as to be revered and remembered for generations beyond her death. And the punchline is that the mogul decides the best way to do this is to make a movie. And that really sets the tone for the rest of the film because it lets us know this is going to be a total send-up of the filmmaking world and filmmaking process and the pretensions and the powerful characters at the center of that process. So then we go on to see the creative process of the two lead actors and the tensions and bitterness and petty rivalry between the two lead actors and also the film's director, who is an eccentric dynamo directress who plays God and toys with these men. So yeah, I loved it personally. I thought it was brilliant. It consists of many different vignettes and different scenes, which I just loved because each could stand alone as a sketch. And I think it pulls off the sort of like dark satirical humor that I feel like Spanish directors and filmmakers do just so much better than many others do. But yeah, I'll go into more. But what do you guys think?
Oh, I loved it. I loved it so much. I feel like this is the first time I've been on this podcast and actually enjoyed all of the films that we've watched. But
yeah, me too.
This one was so goddamn good. It was I loved the fact that they set Penelope Cruz as Lola, this, crazy sort of director who was just, because she's this powerful godlike figure. And I quite enjoyed that it was a woman doing that and playing with the strings of two men. And I would love to see endlessly Penelope and Antonio Banderas on screen together. But I think it was this idea of like, it really showed the director process. And I liked that it puts you in that zone. Whereas if you think you want to be an actor, maybe watch this film, because I feel it really represents what you'll be going through when you're under a director who's actually directing you, because it gets into that minutia of, well, you're going to be put to the test of your limits. And that's to bring out these incredible performances. And then whether you want to act out of spite and, sort of undermine the film, or whether you want to go with those emotions and embrace them. I like the element of the two brothers fighting against each other, and then the two lead men sort of fighting against each other as well, to sort of bring those characters to life. And again, just incredibly well shot. It was very Spanish and very, very impressive to me.
I enjoyed this a lot. I think it feels very symbolic to me that it opens with, like, I'm pretty sure the very first shot is a painting of a sad clown, right? And I think it just seems to set the tone nicely for me. I think what I also like about it is it toes the line very well between sort of, a slight reverence for what is being done, but also not taking it seriously and poking a lot of fun at it. Because now, I think Amanda in particular will have dealt with, actors a lot more than I have, but in a role like interviewing them and going to all these film festivals or the rest of it, I've spoken to a lot of actors over the years, and a lot of the time they do straddle the line between sort of precious ridiculousness and inspired method for getting like into character and this sort of thing. And I think the performances that you've got here, at the center from Antonio Banderas, and just remind myself who the other actor is. I've already forgotten his name. Oscar Martinez. Yeah, I think that, and they play these kind of like, these dueling approaches. You've got Antonio Banderas' character Felix, who's kind of an Antonio Banderas type, right? But I think he's probably meant to have been, in slightly dumber films and maybe Antonio Banderas has been in on average, right? Because because Antonio Banderas has got a few clangers in his filmography, right? And this sort of like slightly more studied theater academic focused actor in Ivan, who's Oscar Martinez's character. And the thing that's really quite funny about it is at any given moment, either one of them can look like a precious fool, and the other one like they're the actual professional, and it kind of goes back and forth. And I think that's a really impressive balance to pull off in terms of kind of like the slightly out there way that creatives sometimes approach work. I think Penelope Cruz is superb. I think of the three leads, she's a standout for me, because I think that's the role where it kind of sums the film up, and when it's kind of like it's balancing this idea of, you know, being innovative and creative and finding new ways to come at things, and being an absolute maniac and just being, you know, a little bit crazy. I think it balances all those things really pretty well. It's a very funny film. It's got some very good sight gags, actually. You know, we're talking a lot, but we're talking a lot about the, you know, the interplay between the three main characters here. But, you know, there's one involving a rock in particular. I'll leave it for the film, where I think it's just beautifully done light farce, you know, and there's a lot of elements in the film where it pulls that off really, really pretty well. So I think it's balancing a few things. It does different types of comedy really very well. The performances, I think, are all great. I mean, you know, there's one, to give an example of the kind of the two men like playing off one another. There's one where they're sitting down and they're kind of sitting in chairs opposite each other, and they're both going through the kind of like their warm-up routines, you know, like how they get themselves, you know, ready to go. And it's ridiculous, you know. I mean, it's not. I wouldn't say it's necessarily particularly sort of, you know, imaginative, inventive, but the performance of how they pull it off is just funny. I mean, it's different to sort of like the film we've just spoken about, NUDE TUESDAY, in that regard, but it's every bit as accomplished in how it gets it across. And I think that's all to do with you know, some of the framing for the visual gags, but also the performances and how they've got them to play amongst one another. The only thing I would say about it is, I think your reaction to how the film looks will depend on how much you go with it, because I think it's pretty obvious to me this was filmed under COVID restrictions, right? There's a lot of cavernous sets and, you know, very open settings and a lot of, you know, sort of like dead space around the actors. And I think for me it kind of worked, right? Because it you know, it kind of like, you know, centered them in frame a lot and just focused very specifically in on what they were doing in a way that I don't think it would have if it had been. So, I mean, I think the important thing here to mention here is this follows them while they're basically rehearsing for the film, right? You don't see them shooting the film. And I think it works for me in a way that I don't think it would have worked if it had been set during the shooting of the film. You know, I think it allows it to focus on a bit more. But, you know, for others, it could maybe be a little bit too distancing and alienating. I could see that. It didn't for me, but it is fairly obvious how the circumstances under which it was filmed for me.
That's a really interesting point in terms of, I didn't even think about, but why I actually really liked the set design, and particularly the costuming with Penelope Cruz. Her hair was fantastic. I think, as you were mentioning, everyone's mentioned quite well, but I think I was listening to a artist YouTube talk of an artist I really admire, and how all artists, she's saying that all artists have to have some form of ego. And for me, this was a film about various different kinds of ego, and the artifice of that process, you know, from the funder, from the executive producer who has to make a decision on how he, you know, why this is, to, you know, to all the different main players. But I did like that the auteur filmmaker, who was kind of the humorously like put in this, I mean, gorgeous, like the way her costumes were, Penelope Cruz, and sort of shown as this kind of very attractive figure or whatever, but was also, you know, was a female, and it was, you know, sort of having to deal with these two male egos, you know, and that process as well. I liked every aspect of it. It's definitely more my sort of humor, and I think this film, in terms of how everything was put together, was really captivating, and all the things you've mentioned. So the you know, so super symmetrical, super isolating, super artificial, which the film process often is, and to get what you need out of it, all the way till the end, where, you know, they're in that kind of fake film festival, and having to sort of discuss what the film could have been, would have been, what it, like how a film lives on in thoughts. I think it was really smart, and really well done.
I enjoyed the hyper realness of it. I don't think the setting was very distracting, and it didn't scream this is COVID restrictions to me. It just screamed this like hyper reality world in which people live in architectural spaces that resemble and exist in spaces that resemble more museums or an art gallery than any kind of like the back of a theater rehearsal room. So getting to that level of fame and dealing with that kind of money just exists in a completely different universe, a hyper real universe where everything is to the nth degree. People's egos are, you're at the mercy of everyone's egos and whims, and everything, every interaction sort of an experimentation and leverage and dominance. I loved it. I think it did have good balance, and it was creative. So the balance in the sense that there were sketches that just existed purely to drive home a single satirical point about the industry. So I mean, for example, the one scene where there's about 100 microphones just angled at the producer at the rich pharmaceutical mogul who's funding producing the film. His daughter has been chosen, but based on her merit and talent, of course, not because of nepotism. She's placed at the center of these microphones, and then has to pretty much get off with everyone in the room, with her father watching her, and it just escalates and is so ridiculous. It just serves only to bring home the voyeurism of film and how female actors are just sort of used, and how it's fantastic, and just for pure comedy gold, and also so that we can solidify Lola the eccentric director's status as a total don, really.
I think the fake film festival at the end, I also just want to point out, I haven't been in a few situations like that. I did enjoy that scene, and just this sort of the absolute banal questions that people come out with sometimes. Like and I think it was one of these kind of like everyone sucks here scenarios where it's like, like people are asking the most banal, stupid questions of these like fabulously creative people, but then at the same time they're just like shooting them down with such like utter disdain. These people who like come to see a film, it was like really pretty well observed. I think that's true of the whole film. I think it does all that very well.
It was so brutal.
I was going to say, and I think if anything, Jim, what you're touching on with all the sort of dead sort of space in the area, I think if anything, that just heightened the relationships between the three sort of people. It made it more it made it more theatrical. It was like, I liked how it was looking at those like three intense egos, and they're three intense egos that will always be there. And it's that, well, someone has to bend a knee. No one is. They're just superficially moving around it. But there's one person who's clearly in charge of this whole setting.
Oh, I love
not losing that.
I love the satellite characters, I think, being there as much as I do the core central three characters, because they say so much as well. So, for example, there's a scene involving a big, I don't know what you'd call it, a thresher. I'm going to go with thresher. Tell me if there's another way to be going about describing it.
I would have said a crusher, so similar things.
There you go. Well, so there's a thresher involved, and basically things of great value and emotional significance, and there's symbols of the actor's ego get thrown into this thresher. And there's a brilliant, really enjoyable couple of shots of just random stuff being thrown into the Thresher of Doom machine, which are just so enjoyable, and just like the perfect mix of just really surreal and funny, but also kind of bordering on something you'd see in an art film as well.
Yeah, no, it was
but then they make a mess, but then they make a ridiculous mess. All the stuff comes out the thresher, and the comedic point has been made, the philosophical point has been made, and then you just see the thresher just left on a stage, and then there's just loads of crap on the floor, and then in shuffles a cleaner to pick it up and to clean up after everything, and then they linger on that shot, and it's just there's a lot of really great scathing sort of like political sort of points about class in there as well.
But also that was it was such a strange cutaway that you held on for like three minutes, and it actually kind of was slightly soothing. Like
it was very soothing. Yeah, despite how chaotic it is, and about how dramatic it is, and how unbearable these people are, it's so enjoyable. I would watch it again tomorrow.
Oh, me
Absolutely.
too. I would happily watch it again. And then also, what about that beginning part? So in the beginning, there's the whole part where the director forms her sort of vision book. That's the only thing I can describe it as, because it is not sort of like charts of where people
So funny.
It's not a storyboard. And just the weird thing she puts in there, and you just see her in her process.
Cigarettes.
This is it. This is you making art. Here we go.
Oh, it's so good. They managed, I mean, it's kind of, what's the quote? So there's this really oft referenced quote about creative differences between actors that is centers around Laurence Olivier and Dustin Hoffman. The latter being really committed to method acting, and then Olivier remarking scathingly in response to Hoffman being sleep deprived to better perform a character. He said, "My dear boy, why don't you just try acting? It's so much easier." And that is such like a hackneyed, well-known like trope about the film industry, about actors, but that is kind of the central core of the film, is that tension and that kind of like creative differences.
Because Antonio Banderas is being a lot more functional about it, but Oscar Martinez's character is more about kind of like connecting with the character,
but it's so fresh,
feeling
it's
the
so
pain,
fresh.
and
It's not remotely for someone who gives even half of a shit about lovies or the industry whatsoever. It is just this perfect like fly on the wall outside looking in kind of. It's wonderful, I think. And there's a really great scene in the acting workshop as well, which really early on. So the character who's the actor who is much more enamored with the finer arts as he sees them, and is on the more pretentious end of the spectrum as an actor. He's hosting an acting workshop, and he poses the question to this room of students and says, okay, so none of you are actually going to make it. Only about one of you in this room is going to make it as an actor. If anyone here believes that's not them, then you can just leave, and nobody leaves. And nobody leaves. He's left with a whole room of people who believe vehemently that they are going to be the successful one, and there's not even a hint of doubt. And then that's all it is. And then the scene it's just a little implant, and then they just move on. And it's full of those like wonderful little moments, just making fun of the creatives. I love it.
Great. So it's an win-win for us. Official competition it's going to be playing on the 19th at View as part of the Edinburgh International Film Festival. I think after that, it'll be coming out in theaters across the UK, I think maybe in September. So you should definitely go see that one. Definitely. We might see you there. So check it out. So just wanting to ask everybody, if you've seen some other films that you want to recommend, or you want to quickly highlight, or what you're thinking. We'll be catching up with the rest of the team, or maybe some more of us again, with some interviews and stuff on a second program. But what are you looking for? We still have a week to go. So what's on your list of must go sees, or you've already seen and you need to make sure other people go see as well?
I definitely want to go see Anonymous Club, which is described as an anti-rock doc. It's about Courtney Burnett, the Australian singer-songwriter, and about her touring and her experiences of the creative process. And I also like to go see The Territory, which is directed by a cinematographer turned documentarian. And it follows a group of Indigenous activists in Brazil as they try and resist, basically. It's extremely cinematic, and I think I hope it will do justice to the cause in its beauty and impact. So I'm looking forward to those.
I'm extremely excited for Special Delivery, which has been described as sort of drive set from a Korean female perspective. So it's this idea of a woman behind the wheel. It is So-Dan Park, who was one of the stars from Parasite. And it's just basically traveling around junkyard employee, secretly working as a delivery clerk and dealing with unusual delivery requests. And that one's on Friday afternoon, and I think Thursday night, but I'm very excited for that one. Also off to see The Forgiven tomorrow, which stars Ray Fiennes and Jessica Chastain, which has a bit of sort of a political distress sort of position, but that should be quite entertaining. And then also Axiom, which I'm going to see right after we finish here, which is all about a young museum attendant named Julius, who everyone loves and thinks he's a lovely person, and he goes on a boat trip with some aristocrats, and it turns out he's not what he seems to be. So it's this whole looking at, is he a villain, is he not? And yeah, really excited for those.
So in my case, there's a few things because of the ongoing demands of a 6-month-old baby. I'm not sure how many of them I'll get to see, but ones I would probably have an eye on. Also, like Isobel, Special Delivery looks pretty good to me, so I would quite like to catch that. What I'm going to highlight, though, are 2 films which I saw at Sundance back in January, and they're screening at the festival. I think they will also be getting UK releases, though, but they're both definitely worth seeing. The first one I'm going to mention is Resurrection, which is a sort of thriller horror starring Rebecca Hall. Rebecca Hall is superb in the film, and she's basically playing, without going too far into it, because part of the pleasure of the film is to kind of like tease out its, the backstory, which is kind of like driving all the behavior of the characters within it. But the central point is that she's an abuse survivor who is then trying to navigate this trauma kind of rearing its head again. And it features a just creepy as all hell performance from Tim Roth, who is also absolutely superb in it. It is not a film for the faint of heart. Without going into too many details, I could also say I saw this film while my wife was 8 months pregnant, and that was a very, very, very poor choice. It was a very poor choice on my part. But in terms of the actual effectiveness of the film, is really effective. It does what it wants to set out to do superbly, and it has a Rebecca Hall performance at the center of it that is just so unbelievably intense. It really continues that kind of like home run of performances that she's had in recent years on that front. So that one I would definitely check out if you can. The other one I'm going to highlight is actually the Closing Gala film, but it's going to be coming out next month. We hope to do it on the show, but we didn't quite manage to kind of get the access to it to cover it, but we might try and do it next month because it is going to come out in UK cinemas at the end of September. And sadly, although I won't say this out loud to the people who gave me access to the screener for it to rewatch it at Sky Cinema, which probably means it will just die a slow streaming death, unfortunately. But basically, it's a science fiction film which is centered upon a synthetic sibling for a young girl, and it's that sort of like gently dystopian light sci-fi with big ideas that is very much my bag. It's directed by Kogan Nada, who did Columbus, which I think a lot of people will have seen. I really think it's superb. It's a very moving film, but it's also a film with a lot of different things to say, to whisper, let's say, in various different on various different topics. And it's got a Colin Farrell performance at the middle of it, which I think is really pretty good. And Justin H. Min, who plays the android sibling Yang of the title, a very good performance from him as well. So I really think it's an excellent film. It's an excellent science fiction film, but it's not it's a science fiction film that I think a lot of people could get into. It's a very touching film in a lot of ways as well. But if you can't see it at the festival, then do check it out when it comes out. I think it's an excellent choice for the Closing Gala, and I was very impressed with it when I saw it.
Great. Yeah. And all of those sound great. And I'm looking forward to seeing as many of those films as possible. I'd also like to make a call out for the film I saw yesterday evening, A Cat Called Dom, which is a documentary animation hybrid by Scottish animators Will Anderson and Ainsley Henderson. It's we're talking a lot about humor. It's funny, but it's really sad as well because it follows the story of Will and his mother who was dealing with cancer, and how sort of he processed it through creativity and whatnot. But also a film that kind of goes in lots of different ways. It's definitely experimental, and it was worth listening to, and also makes me really appreciate, because I was really happy there was a Q&A. I really like Q&As, even if they're banal questions coming from the audience, as Jim suggests, because sometimes those Q&As go quite funny or strange, and this one went a little off, and I met the filmmakers afterwards and told them so, but maybe too much. But I love them, and it's a good film. It's worth checking out. as well. So, and it's world premiere for those filmmakers. So give that a whirl, and give them all a whirl. The Q&As, this film festival is worth everything. It's a lovely, and there's a lovely energy in the room right now. That's the one thing I'm really enjoying is you know, like it's back, like it really feels like a film festival's back, and I'm really excited to explore it more throughout the week. So we will be back with you on a final recap on that. So stay tuned for that. But in the meantime, enjoy the festival if you can.